Hi, everybody. There's a lot for you to digest in The World Must Know. The first section, the Nazi assault. So I want to hit some of the high points rather quickly. I hope I can do this in less than 10 minutes. And if I can, great. If it goes to 15, sorry. Okay. What you must understand to understand anything about the Holocaust is that Jews were in every European country. At times, Russia expelled some, Spain expelled some, but for the most part, they were in every country. They either assimilated, like most of the Jews in Germany, they were part of the German culture. Many of them consider themselves German more than they did Jewish. Also, there were less than 1% of the population in Germany were Jewish. So I find it interesting that Hitler had such a hatred for them. There seems to be no explanation for it except maybe that he knew because there was anti Semitic feeling all over Germany that he could capitalize on that. If Jews weren't assimilated, they lived in the shtetl, and that was a community unto themselves, part of a city, but they had their own stores, they had their synagogues, they had their own schools, and they lived pretty much as Jews had lived for the last 2,000 years. One thing you also have to remember is that Hitler takes power legally, and I'm not going to go in great detail because you're going to be reading this, but remember, Germany was in a depression. The whole world was in a depression, but it really hit Germany hard because of the Treaty of Versailles that put heavy sanctions on Germany, although recent historians have said that most of the sanctions had been lifted by the time Hitler took power. In 1933, the Nazis won enough seats for Hitler to be appointed to chancellor. They thought this would appease him. They thought they put him in a place where they could watch him. They didn't know how devious he was because the Reichstag, the building where their legislature met, was burnt down. Now, there was a flaw in their constitution that said that for any reason, basically, where it looked like the government was being taken over, martial law could be imposed. Hitler did that, and he took full power. Recently, historians seem to think that it was the Nazis that burnt down the Reichstag. It was something that Hitler had orchestrated so that he could take power. Oops, going the wrong way. The other thing you have to realize is the Nazi Party was based on racism, a racism directed at the Jews. Remember that anti-Semitic feelings were rooted deeply in the European culture. The Jews fled Israel when their temple was burnt in 70 AD. And so they were moving up into Russia and then from there all over Europe. And when any refugees come in, people that are already there look at them like, what are you doing? I mean, think about the refugees from Syria right now. Nobody seems to want them. Oh, they'll take our jobs, they'll take our resources, our taxpayer dollars are going to pay for them. This is the same thing that was going on in Germany, maybe not taxpayer dollars, but in all these countries as the Jews moved. Hitler was anti-Semitic, but I think he was smart enough to see it was a rallying point, given the depression and the inflation that rocked Germany. He could grab those ideas and appeal to a part of the society that felt disenfranchised. Sorry, had trouble this morning. And that became his rallying point, and the Jews became scapegoats. Also, as Hitler took power, being Jewish became a blood issue rather than a religious affiliation. There is nothing in Jewish writing that says that if you're born into the faith, you're a Jew, but if you're not born into the faith, you can convert. One of my friends, her sister converted into the Jewish faith. She had been Catholic. So the Nuremberg laws sort of sealed it. And they said basically if 3 to 4 grandparents were Jewish, a person was Jewish. If someone was married to a Jew, they were Jewish. Okay, so there was a lot of this kind of thing. It was very technical, but basically just remember 3 to 4 grandparents, you were Jewish, nothing you can do about it. And you had to have records, and the Aryans that were running around, and Aryans aren't even a people. I mean, they're not even a race, but that's what he called them. The Germans and people in other countries were running around looking at baptismal records, because that's where you could prove that you were baptized into a church, so you must be non-Jewish. So churches were besieged asking for, hey, give me my baptismal record, give me that of my grandparents, make sure. And since people sort of stayed put, it's not a transit society like we have now, you could trace your ancestry back through baptismal records. And to even make it more of a blood issue, the science of eugenics was developed. Now, eugenics they started teaching it in 1933. They were still teaching it to 1945. For 12 years, people were told that eugenics was science. It was a pseudoscience that said that there was something in your blood that made you inferior if you were a Jew. And they measured the size of one's nose, how wide apart eyes were, and their eye color was. Also their hair color, it should be light in color, blonde preferably, used to deem someone Aryan or someone Jewish. There were people, especially when they went into Poland, they were looking for people who were Polish or Slavic who could pass these requirements, and they would be good stock to breed. And literally, they thought of people as stock to breed. Women were, German women were held in high esteem in the in Germany, but only to be mothers, wives and mothers, and to produce blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids. Basically, that's what they were to do. When a couple got married, a German couple got married, they received a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book, that was basically his racist diatribe that he used as a roadmap to anti-Semitism. When children were born, mothers got, I think when you had 5 kids, you got a nice pin that had, a little diamond or something for each child. I mean, they really honored their parents. Events after the Nazi takeover that you should be looking at. Well, basically, this goes into the second section, but when the Nazis took over, they boycotted the Jewish. Whoops. Back. Okay, they boycotted Jewish businesses. That was the first show of force, with the Gestapo going after them. They removed Jews from Aryan social and economic society. You couldn't be a doctor, you couldn't be a lawyer, you couldn't own a business. I mean, this was kind of a gradual process, but this was basically what they did. They seized Jewish property, first their businesses, then their homes. Before they booted them out of their homes, they made sure they got all the jewels and money. Then they registered Jews, names and all that idea, and where they lived. Then they threw them all in ghettos, and then eventually into the concentration camp. Now these events happened first in Germany, and then they were sort of the process that was used in every other country they took over. It happened in other countries more swiftly than it did in Germany. In Germany, it took about to 1939 for all of this to happen. Well, really 41 for this to happen. In other countries, it happened swiftly. You could resist, you could immigrate, but trying to get out was difficult. Remember, Weizal begged his father to immigrate to Israel. Well, Israel wasn't taking much. It was controlled by Britain at that point, and the British just weren't issuing visas to get into the area. U.S. was reluctant to take things. England was reluctant, although they did take 10,000 children in the kindergarten transport. But people were really, even if you had a visa saying you could come in, like Cuba said, yeah, you guys can come. And then they got there and found out that their visas had been canceled. So it was very difficult to immigrate. Some chose to hide. And we'll talk about that later in the book as well as in some other things we read. And if you did fight back, like the one man did when he found out his parents had been removed from their home, and you shoot a German official, well, not only are you dead, it becomes a reason for the Germans, the Nazis, to start attacking Jewish people. The worst event was, and the turning point really for me when the Holocaust started was Kristallnacht, when they burned and broke glass, and they did that to Jewish businesses that were left and to synagogues. And they rounded up people and they took them to concentration camps. The one that was there at the time, the first was Dachau. And to me, Kristallnacht was the beginning of the Holocaust, because the Jews at that point knew they were basically doomed. They better get the hell out of Dodge, okay? Sorry for the swearing. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. What was the world's response to this? None. Oh, yeah, they had the Evian conference, but nobody decided to take anything. In fact, the Prime Minister of Britain, Chamberlain, said, sure, you can have part of Czechoslovakia. That way we can stay out of war. It didn't help. They ended up in the war, Britain did, and they elected Churchill at the time. There are a lot of other important things in the book. I'm sure you'll recognize them as you read. This sort of gives you kind of an overview of important points in the first part for you to look at. Thanks for listening.